had clients that it just is like, okay, what'd they just say? I have to ask them 2 or 3 times, and you're so far so good. How do you pronounce your name? Bianca?
Bianca, that's my name, yes.
Awesome. How'd you find me?
I found you, I don't really know. I was just looking for something that resonated with me because I found it really hard to find. I read so many things, and the thing that came the closest was all these podcasts about intuitive eating. And
like eating to hunger.
Yeah, but I was a bit like they're like so focused on the biological things, which is great for people who are like severely underweight, probably. But I was like, I'm missing the whole point of the emotional part. So I was like, okay, maybe that's not really gonna work. And I don't know how I got to you. I think it was like a YouTube video where you were just working with a client, and it was really nice because I could really see how you answered the things, and yeah, it resonated a lot. I really thought like you were quite hard as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, that poor girl.
Well, yeah, I, especially in those early videos with people coming into the clinic because they didn't have any reference to the work that I was doing. And so it was fresh and new. And sometimes like they didn't know what they were walking into. When I'm working with like, clients like yourself, you've had enough work, you've watched the YouTubes, you've gotten like how I work and the way I give feedback to where it's not personal, to where you're like, okay, she's just,
also, you need to challenge as well this let's say the eating disorder voice, otherwise it can go in circles. So
and you I know from my own experience with an eating disorder is the beliefs you carry about it and the wanting and needing for the disorder or the mechanisms of trying to stay thin. If you want recovery, you can't continue to have those same excuses. You have to surrender those things. And so it's very, it's full of dissonance, cognitive dissonance, the presentation of something that conflicts with a belief you're holding or a want that, these are things you want, but yet you want recovery too. You can't have both. You can't expect to hold on to this thought and get recovery. So yeah, it's not easy. And that's one thing I know for myself is when I recovered was when I faced the truth.
Yeah, that's really what I love also about the approach. It's the first time I hear someone really like facing the fear that strictly like you do. I haven't really, but I actually study psychology myself, which is also one of the reasons why it became unbearable for me to live with such a mask, because if you're studying this and you're facing, like I'm a big fan, for example, of Carl Jung and
with the AA, with the 12 steps.
And then I'm thinking like I'm a hypocrite.
Well, here's the thing. Here's what you need to understand. Usually people are drawn to psychology to fix themselves. So you're not a hypocrite. You're actually very typical. The problem is when it's the presentation that I am this, right? Like I'm educated, so therefore I don't have these issues. That's the narcissism. So what you're recognizing is potentially the narcissism attached to it.
Yes.
And because you're presenting an identity around, I have a psych degree and I study this with the idea that means that I'm superior psychologically. That is not the case. I mean, look at Carl Jung, right? Look at some of the most incredible gurus in the psych world. They themselves are admittant. Most of my drive is to heal what I'm struggling with in myself.
Yeah, that's like the main thing.
Yeah. So to create a persona around it is a sign. That's like a symptom, right?
Yeah, that's true.
True. My dad has a master's in psych, and let me tell you something. He absolutely was trying to heal himself through it. He was a Vietnam vet. He had horrible PTSD.
And it's very often like I see it in my class. I mean, my story is a bit different. Like I didn't really do it to fix myself because honestly, here psychology it's very statistical. It's not really deep existentialistic thing.
Oh, it's
really,
more is it more like neurochemistry and?
Yeah, it's really becoming everything that is visible. So they're really, which is not that bad because at least it doesn't attract people to like, I don't know, have big theories that they don't know anything about.
Well, yeah, well that would be like that would be, well, that's, yeah, well, there's got to be a blend, you know, because if you look at psychology, of course there's biology and neurochemistry around it, but how much of it is undefinable because we can't define what consciousness is and how people perceive things, right? And how then from there their brain responds and the body responds. You know, your perceptions of something. I follow a scientist, a neuro scientist who studies the amygdala, and he's actually one of the most well-regarded scientists of the amygdala. And I love his work because he's looking at how the amygdala is receiving information before it responds. So it's really not the fear organ.
Funny, I had a course about this.
Yeah, that it's there's something receiving, and where is that? And there is no science around that because it's like how do we have science around someone's beliefs patterns that creates a perception of their environment that they respond to? You know,
a physical response often before they even have an explanation.
Correct. And that's this is why I really love, and if you've watched my YouTubes long enough, you're going to commonly hear me reference Dr. David R. Hawkins, who
I saw it.
He's incredible. I mean, he passed away in 2013, but the work that he did in consciousness and kind of creating, he wrote with Linus Pauling, Ortho-Molecular Biology. I mean, he was a incredible scientist, and he deviated from, you know, that form of science after he published Ortho-Molecular Biology and went into consciousness, which is very difficult to study because you can't prove anything.
Should be more people like that.
Well, the blend of the two, I feel like he did such an incredible job, but there's also a point where there's no science to explain this. There's no mechanics. There's no, how do you explain something that doesn't look, we perceive things on a linear, our human perception is linear. We see things sequentially. So,
it's not at all like that.
Well, reality is not like that, you know, so our mind wants to see the sequence, and so science up to now is sequential. This, then that, to the Newtonian paradigm. This happens, then this happens. This is the cause and effect, right? When you look at it outside of human sequential perception, it's like, well, for this to happen, there's like 50 different things that had to have taken place. So it's like a syndrome. It's not a disease.
Yeah, and
anyways.
that's the whole thing with synchronicity as well. Like, how can you feel something at a certain moment? Because if time is not linear, then you probably already feel something that you've lived, maybe. So it's all very complicated.
It is, I know. And so it's kind of funny that even the most intelligent scientists dumb it down to sequential thought processes. Because that's all we can, that's how our human perception exists. So we're so narcissistic that we think the whole universe works sequentially.
Yeah, that's true.
I know, it's cute. We're such cute little ants and parasites on this planet. We're cute. We think we are the end-all, be-all of existence. Yeah. Anyways, it certainly helps when you come out of that to know that my own limit of perception it's so limited. So it kind of keeps you humble in that. But it also opens you up to possibility because you're not limited by your own narcissistic perception of how things work.
Yes, you're not creating the same thoughts.
You're not limited. Exactly. You're at least open to suggestion or intuition and so that actually I would assume people who are more open-minded, their brains look different on a scan. Because they're not in survival, one. So oxygen is going to the frontal cortex. You probably have more, anyways, who cares? Really, who cares?
We care.
Well, it's fascinating. It's just like interesting. And it just, it makes life enjoyable to me. Not because there's so much. It's because I can actually just be human and be as dumb as I am. I don't have to be better than that.
Yeah.
You know?
We're
Anyways.
just here for a while doing something.
Yeah, we're just... exactly. We're just our
Make
little...
such a big story out of our incredible...
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I'm getting out of it. I'm really doing it. But
It feels good.
I came to the realization that I was like, and I am still, like, I'm constantly fighting the habit of making myself such an important human being.
That's survival mode. That means you're surviving. You're still in survival. And that's okay. Again, that's that part of the brain we can't remove.
I think it's like it's two sides. Like sometimes I have these moments of it's not really me, and actually they made the change possible. It's like sometimes I have moments where I get out of this whole Bianca person, and I just feel things, and those are the moments that make me say like, oh wow, this is something different. Like I hear birds different, I taste different, but then all of a sudden, like I come back to whatever I believe, whatever I made up, and I actually, like, when it comes to the eating disorder, I realized, and I only admitted to myself that it has been 15 years that I'm struggling with this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really long time. And the worst part is that, like, if you would ask my friends right now, like, do you think she has an eating disorder? They would say no. Like, nobody knows. I am so good at hiding.
Yeah.
That I never, they would maybe say, yeah, she's like a health freak, because that's the phase that I was, the latest one.
Oh, yeah, well, and that's pervasive, and that's why people accept it so much, because that's supposed to be seen as so good. You know, so it's like, you know, in the 1990s when I was going through my own coping, you know, survival coping with body image, I was so fit. So it's like you can be praised for your issue, and no one really knows that it's pretty demented. It's really actually quite dark.
You want to judge people as well. That's the price you pay for it. And I don't know if my friends really were like enjoying being with me. Like,
well, you probably, I don't know if they cared as much. They probably just thought, oh, she's crazy. Not my issue. Yeah, because they, you know, is it really their goal to enjoy being with you? I mean, again, that right there was that would be the self, like do they enjoy being with me? Like that's your gift to them, is that they have to. Most people, like I have friends that clearly have issues. I don't care. Like I don't rely on them to enjoy myself, so they can be that way, and I don't have to criticize them.
Think about it,
no, exactly. It's like they have their own issues. None of my business. They'll figure it out. I care about them as people, but I don't care if this is their issue. They'll figure it out. So it doesn't impact me if they're in a state of mind that's like, you know,
yeah, that's true.
I just feel bad for them. It's like, well, that sucks. They can't just relax and enjoy themselves in this moment. But that doesn't take away from me relaxing and enjoying myself in the moment. I'm having a good time, you know, because of the independence I have in terms of my own well-being. And so what you just said, that thought process is like, oh yeah, symptomatic. That to me is symptomatic of they don't enjoy me. Well, that's symptomatic of the narcissistic core of survival, which is your importance, the importance of me, you know, and it's so hard to see it when you're in it because it's not malicious.
No.
You know, it's
no. Well, it is, but it isn't.
Yeah, it's not. You don't intend that, but it's so self-absorbed around
That's
how.
Why it's so malicious, because it comes as a snake, you know. It's like always changing heads.
So the thing about going in and out, you have to see that certain conditions that it is always there. It's just certain conditions diminish it. So this concept of connection or higher consciousness or illumination, whatever the hell you want to call it, your human nature is what I like to call it. Human nature on the non-survival end, that's the way it is for everybody. So, you know, when you feel that connection, it's not because of you. It's because you're actually accessing what the trees are accessing and what that dog is accessing. You're not special. It's actually an energy zone, if you want to call it that. This is something I've learned from Dr. Hawkins and how he describes it. A lot of people like say, I am enlightened. No, you're not. You're at a level of enlightenment. And the fact that someone would say I'm enlightened is like a sign that you're not. But when you hit that space, you realize it's not me. It is not me that is this experience. It is this experience that is the experience. I am somehow open to it.
Yeah.
And so it takes the narcissism out. It's like, oh, it's not personal. I'm not special.
Yeah, true.
It's a fabulous thing.
So many habits, like, also probably because I'm a real thinker. Like, let's say I'm having the habit of 29 years of thinking. Let's not call myself a thinker. But,
well, it's the survival of trying to fix something or thinking or trying to understand. Again, it's like
always understanding, and I've been like this since I was a child because I had a really difficult childhood, and I was always analyzing things like as a survival mode to get it, to be aware, to have
to get out, to fix it.
To fix it. And,
super cool, right? That's amazing. That's millennia of evolution working perfectly. When you really look at it.
The problem is when you don't need it anymore.
No, now your coping is your weapon, or your defense is now a weapon against you. So now your coping mechanism is actually harming your, not just physically, because you could say these coping mechanisms are meant to be there for a bear, for a temporary famine, for, you know, if you look at the evolution, it's like, well, these are important under certain circumstances, but the human psyche and the physicality of this response isn't supposed to be over a course of 15, 20, 30 years. So the physical, you know, illness, the disease impact that occurs can be directly related to the continuous like weapon against your own psyche, not realizing that it's actually a defense mechanism for your soul. Anyways.
To defend the soul.
Yeah, it's a soul defense mechanism that impacts the psychological response as a human, as an animal, right? Why would you
want to defend the soul as a child, you know?
Unawareness, lack of sense of capacity. You know, you don't have relativity. You know, you don't have the ability to go, oh, this isn't that bad, because you haven't experienced something worse yet. So it's really a matter of just protecting your ignorance and naivety, you know. And the hard part is that position as a child people can lock themselves into that naivety into adulthood. So the coping mechanism is only relevant to how naive and ignorant you were. Yes. Even though your current wisdom would never respond that way again, because you now have relativity around you, right? The law of relativity, it exists psychologically. It's a mathematical equation. It's how this works in your brain as you develops more, the awareness develops more, the more you have relativity, getting outside to see a relative difference, right?
To be able to observe yourself, actually.
Correct. So exactly from relativity. And so as a child, you don't have that. You don't, not only because you just don't have the experience of life to use, you're just in the present moment as a child and surviving. So you're very reliant on survival mechanisms, and they're amazing. Again, there's a reason why we're still on this planet, and it has a lot to do with that.
Okay.
You know, the problem is your coping mechanism, if you identify by it. Once someone identifies by the coping mechanism, it's narcissistic. Like, it means that you're actually using it to define your either my life sucks and poor me, I'm a victim, or I'm a superior human being and I'm going to prove myself. So you're identifying who you are by this mechanism. And that's where people say, you know, this is just who I am. I'm a thinker. Are you really a thinker? Are you really? Or is that what you do in survival mode? Right?
Yes.
Because you identify by it, and to some degree, once you identify it, it's used as promotion. Even clients that I've worked with who identified by being molested, in some degree, they are promoting it in their mind like competition. Like, my trauma is worse than your trauma. You know, it's amazing how they can do that and how that happens. It's survival mode, you know, but how do you get someone to let that go when they benefit from it somehow, you know?
So basically, you have to let go of whatever you think in what way it's benefiting you. The lie.
You got it. It's really easy. All you got to do is get rid of the benefit.
It's easy to get it, but
well, the feel of it. So
part is so hard. Like, especially I heard your experience with how you like became so close to your suffering that like you basically is what you wanted to die. Like, and then you said like, okay, it's either that or, but I didn't come to the point where I wanted to die. Like, for me, I don't even know how it is to not be in survival. I have nothing to compare with.
Yeah, no one does. No one does. I didn't either. That's what. So it's blind. The work that I do with people is super blind. You have no idea where I'm taking you. I had no idea where I was going either. It was just, I had to assume whatever it is, even if it's horrible, it is not as bad as this, because this right here is worthy of blowing my brains out. There's no point to life. None at all. I'd rather just die. You know, so the alternative is complete non-existence. And if that's the truth of, because that's what I'm running away from. Again, this clarity came to me in preparation to kill myself. So, and I'd already decided. So it wasn't a negotiation. Am I going to kill myself? It was, I'm already going to die. So then this opened up this like awareness for me in the processing part of reconciling my life. I actually opened myself to question and wonder what was wrong. Where did this go wrong? And I did it not in a like, I'm trying to survive way. I'm telling you, the choice for me to commit suicide was probably the most important choice I've made in my life.
Maybe you did.
I did. No, I truly believe there was a complete shift I've never been the same. Never ever returned. It's like, you can't. How could I go back to that? It's so horrible. Why would you choose to go back into it when your whole your awareness is like permanently changed? It's a permanent change, and it is a death. It took dying for me to open this up because, again, I can look at this and simplify it. The feel and experience of it it's a nightmare, right? Because you're absolutely opening yourself up to what feels like murder. Your brain is responding to being attacked. It's not actual dying that is the hard part. That to me is like, well, if you're dying, you go into acceptance. But if you're being attacked, now it's fight or flight. I don't know if there's a very clear difference versus like if you're in a moment and you're aware, I am now passing away. What's your response to that? You have no choice. You go into acceptance and it's a willful surrendering. If someone's attacking you, not the same. And so what I had to open myself up to is being attacked. And it feels, and that's why and this is why the recovery process is so predictable for everybody, because we have the same brain, same exact wiring, same exact evolution. Your response to fight or flight is so identical to my response to fight or flight. You're just choosing which one. How am I going to do it? Am I going to blend into the background? Am I going to go into complete paralysis? Am I going to inflate myself with narcissism? Which one am I going to use? We're all the same. We're like a friggin' dog.
Shifts as well. Like, you can go quick into victim, and then all of a sudden, for me, I have moments where, like, I become a narcissist and I get, like, really arrogant, and then all of a sudden I feel like a little child.
Well, it's the same thing, right? The victim position is a way to manipulate people through, look at me, I'm poor and horrible and everything's bad for me. It's the same thing as the inflated self. It's like, but it's a manipulative. It's like, I'm going to manipulate people. So it's, again, you have to look at the mechanisms here and it's so predictable. So when you surrender those mechanisms, what's going to arise is you're going to get murdered. It's going to come across as something outside of myself is going to obliterate my existence.
How can you do that, like, in a very, I'm not going to say fast way because it sounds like
well,
but in a way, yes, because I feel like I lost so much time already.
You have to get over that. You're just going to have to get over that. That's a victim positionality. You have to just assume it's taken whatever it's taken of this lifetime to get me to this place of surrender. Up until this point, even this information wouldn't have connected because you needed to do some more suffering to get to open yourself to the dissonance you probably felt when you first heard me talk about this. Not only were you hearing truth, but you were hearing dissonance and feeling dissonance because it's like pulling off all the armor. That's a piece of armor. You're defending yourself. You're a narcissist. You know, it's dissonance even though you're hearing the truth, right? To get you to the place of just even sending in a request form to work with me was probably, oh my God. So I have my own personal experience, right, to draw from. But I've also at this point been able to, over the course of 7 years, 8 years, monitor and observe other people go through the experience. And to do it, to monitor and watch other people do it without me really knowing how to guide them through it and learning, how did I do that? How do I take that person and how do I get them to do that? I don't know what happened to me. How do I recontextualize it? You know, so over the course of 7 years and working with other people and monitoring them, I will say the clients that have come to me suicidal, it is so fast. Boom. Sometimes one session and they're out. And it is, whoa, it is that magical. They're that close to, they have nothing to lose. People who they don't have the imminence of death. Okay. I have to help create that imminence of death. Right? You don't have to let this go. There's, your coping mechanisms are still working and you're getting something out of them. Right? So with someone who's still getting something out of it, it takes more time. It takes more suffering.
I mean, I did have the suicidal thoughts because not related to my eating disorder. I actually had like a really narcissistic relationship where I wasn't the biggest narcissist.
Yeah, you were.
And, he really like manipulated me to a point where I was like, he had a lot of things against me. Basically, it's a bit like the eating disorder.
Yeah, holding you hostage.
Another person, it's just more externalized.
Yeah.
And he was like, at a moment in my life, like I couldn't deal with it anymore. But I was addicted also to the mechanism between us.
Yeah, the codependency, like a codependency.
Yeah, the codependency, and I was like, I don't know why exactly, but I know at the last moment I was like, I'd rather die and take all the things you make me fear than to stay with you. Like,
okay, that is exactly the same as, that's like, you are correct, and it is. So this is a great example of how, let's just use the definition of codependency. That is it's like having Stockholm syndrome or battered wife syndrome. This is why I believe in eating disorder. We should stop calling it an eating disorder. It's a syndrome. You're holding yourself hostage to a belief system. And it's directly tied to the body image. So you can see like, okay, that body image of thinness was my boyfriend. It's going to save me. It's going to protect me. He's my rescuer. Right? But at the same time, there's abusiveness. It requires you diet. You can see how the drama triangle is really consistent.
Yeah, there's so much shame beyond it. Like, this is something I realized watching your videos. I was just before I was coming here. It's quite symbolic, actually. I was on a bike, and the wind was like really going against me while I was trying to be here on time. And I just realized at a moment, like, I was like, what would happen if I let it all go? Because I have these moments where I let go, and I was like, I would be ashamed.
Oh, see that right?
I enjoy, for example, food in public, and I'm not at
Lo and behold, the narcissism.
It's,
Shame of
I'm
what?
like,
So,
why?
well, the shame comes from the belief system and the pride and the inflated self. So at some point you used your thinness as a form of inflation. That's the anorexia, if we want to call it that.
Even, I think, because, you know, when I was watching these videos about, you know, intuitive eating and going to your set point weight.
Oh,
I
God.
was like, that's like the weight that is your normal weight when your body doesn't have to diet or do anything.
Correct.
Like your healthy weight.
Well, who knows what that is, right? It's just the weight your body is like hormonally accommodating to, right? And it could be obese. You could be obese.
But I have no clue. Like, I was 14 when I started doing this. My body has never been like that, ever.
Right, you've never been open to it. Yeah. That fear comes from the inflation of your thin supremacy. Again, inflation is pride, glamour. So you believe in thin supremacy. So again, thin supremacy is the idea that thinner people are superior, which equates to safe. I'm safe when I'm thin.
I really don't anymore, actually.
No, you do. If it came up as shame, you do. You do. Don't convince yourself. You might say, okay, let me rephrase this. If it comes up as I would be ashamed, that means you do believe it emotionally. There's a difference between intellect and understanding intellect and how you actually feel emotionally.
They just need to work together.
Well, no, they don't. You have to, because that means that you're held hostage by your intellect then, because the emotional concept or the spiritual awareness can go way beyond your intellect's capacity. Again, the intellect is our linear processing. This, then that, then this, then that. If you're limited emotionally by your intellect, you're basically saying there is nothing outside of intellect. That's like, again, there's nothing outside of my human capacity. So we don't want those to be equal. We want one to be open and the other one to be able to follow that.
Yes,
the problem is the one is super closed and defensive and surviving, and so the intellect is now held hostage by it to work for it.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. So when you say, "But I don't believe," yes, you do. You wouldn't be talking to me if you weren't a thin supremacist.
Like, of course, no. Let's say it is true that I am one, but or at least I've been one.
Mm-hmm.
But I also realize that it also makes me angry, because that's what's creating so much anger now with my let's call it disease, because I'm like, I don't want to be a supremacist, because how can I, even by being thin, I'm supporting this cruelty.
Yes, but if you're angry, that means you're a victim of it. That means it's not again, anger is a manipulative emotion to fight. It's a fighting response as a victim. Are you a victim?
No.
You internalized it and believed it and have used it and have inflated yourself with it at some point in pride around your thinness. I'm special. So what's anger going to do? Besides place blame, because that's what anger really is, blame. Right? So let's take that emotion and see that it goes nowhere.
The anger emotion?
Yeah, it goes nowhere. It's fighting. What are you fighting besides your own belief system that you internalized and have taken advantage of and used to make yourself feel superior and inflated? Give it some grace here. You live in a culture. I don't know. Where are you? You're in Belgium.
Yes.
So I don't know how pervasive thin supremacy is there.
Very.
Okay. Okay.
It's like baseline. Normal.
Yeah. Okay. So
here, you have no willpower to be healthy. That's how people think.
Okay. Well, and it is very human in nature to want to create duality, which is survival, this or that, me and them. You know, we all have this survival nature to want to blend into our background. And if you look different, if you're in the state of narcissism in your survival mode, you're going to put them down and you're going to rise yourself up. So all of this is not to be judged. Even though we can sit here and go, really, you're miserable, you're hurtful, it's a horrible, yeah. But it's actually human nature under the circumstance. So should we judge it? Under these conditions, this human response is promoted. And it's there and it has served the species to some degree. Long enough that it still exists, right? In our evolution. So anger is like saying, I'm better than that. You're not. Neither was I. At this point, I'm not as sensitive to it, right? Like I have discernment around it. Because I've recovered from it. So it's like, what's the likelihood I'm going to go into narcissism ever again? Knowing the consequences. Because it comes at a cost. Right?
How would you say the whole, because I have a hard time with something like 2 years ago, I had some experiences, like mostly physically, like I don't know what's it called, like some spiritual things. Also a lot of dreams I had, which made me started to wonder like who I was and all these things. Besides, well, I didn't really understand what was happening, and I came into contact with people who were, you know, like let's call them the New Age gurus. And I became for a while like vegan.
Oh.
Yeah. And now my issue is a little bit with all this. Like, I wonder, was it also like the eating disorder finding another new way, or
it could be.
Maybe the thing was natural, but then my eating disorder used it. It's hard to tell for me.
Yeah, no, what happens when you are still in that state of survival is it's kind of hard not to take things and do the same thing with everything. So you would take religion and become a narcissist with it. You would take spiritually and become spiritually egotistical. And you're right. You're probably looking back and going, yeah, I just transferred the issues. I took this belief system and created a new religion out of that. I took a different situation and it created a new set of supremacy out of it. You know, but it's even if you don't feel superior, you're still chasing a mirage with something new. When I do that, when I do this, it's still something outside of yourself that's actually doing the work. It's not really coming from within your truth, your actual reality.
The brain, like I call it a bit of brainwash. Like during that time, I was like reading a lot of things, books, because I wanted to make sense of it. And like there is this. It's kind of a religious thing, but I don't know if it's also in Christianity and all these religions. But there was this part where they were saying, like, eating flesh, for example, is bad. And this haunts me until today because I want to, like, recover from every possible theory that I have against food. Yeah. But I'm like, but what if this thing is maybe true, you know?
Well, if it is...
It makes me feel guilty around eating, for example, meat.
Okay, so if you feel guilty about eating meat, just think about that right there. Does that sound right? Did someone feel shame or even guilt eating meat?
Well, it is something that was killed just to serve us.
Yeah, so should all animals feel guilt when they eat?
They don't have a supermarket to choose.
It doesn't matter. They're still killing something. They're still hunting.
Yes, okay, well, if I would be hunting, it would probably be different, but, well, we have so much, I really struggle with it. Like.
Well, it sounds like that's your religion of choice, and you should keep it, and suffer the way you do. You deserve to have guilt. You should feel guilt, because that's built into the system. How's that guilt working for you? Doesn't really sound the way it's, I mean, if it presents itself with guilt, sounds like you might want to really rethink the benefit of that belief system.
Yeah, but The guilt is my emotion.
No, it sounds like it sounds like the manipulation of a program. And you believe it, so you internalized it. Now you think it's your guilt. Is this really your belief system? Did you create it? Are you the creator of this type of fear-mongering around eating animal? No, you've been brainwashed. Yes, it's called programming. There's so many programs out there. So the problem, and you're right, is if you let that go, you're going to have cognitive dissonance around this narcissism, which is survival mode. So is it really harmful to eat an animal?
It doesn't hurt me.
Is it really? And that doesn't mean you don't have compassion for other living things. You know, again, the duality around bad or good. It's totally like there's no relativity in that belief system. That's why you have guilt, because it is super dual, very duality. Duality is this or that. That's very narcissistic. That's very core, self-righteous type thinking. Because there is.
Maybe that's because of my dual state of fight or flight.
Yeah, you could be.
It's not necessarily the religious belief.
It just depends on how you were programmed, because you're correct. It was like I could say I was raised to think this or that, but I know that the lack of grace that was in it, that's my lack of grace. I believed it black and white. There was no lenience in that belief. There is no, you know, and so of course what you just said is absolutely true. But what I said was absolutely true. So what is it? Is it really your belief, or were you programmed to believe that? And the consequence of that programming is continuous guilt or fear of guilt. You know, so we could say the programming is just a box. We can say what we want about a box. It's how you process through it. But you do have to give recognition to, of course, the belief is really honorable. It's loving, but is it gracious? Does it give us room to be human beings? Because you know what? I really like a really good barbecue. There's something about the taste, the flavor. Should we feel shame about that? Because there's human nature involved here. I'm eating a fish. That fish died. But for some reason, it tastes really good.
No, it's not that much the fact of killing the animal. Maybe that's the wrong thing. It's more like, while I was reading these books, it's also a lot of Gnostic books that I was reading, and they don't talk about shame. They just say, like, basically the energy you put into your body is becoming a part of you. So do you?
Interesting. That's body image. Because your body really, if you think about it, if you look at are you really the body? Is that really true? Are you your body? And this is I was actually going to talk about this a little bit ago. I was going to bring up, because that's the direction we're headed, is, are you really your body? Is it really true? Because that's a belief you might never have ever questioned.
No, you are not the body, but
there is no but.
So
no, you don't. You experience through consciousness. You don't experience through the body. You experience through consciousness. So you need to question that belief. That's dogma. You just believed it without question. You might want to question it. What happens if you lose your legs? Are you half a soul? Do you not process the same? What happens if you become a paraplegic? Because based on that belief system, your soul now is broken. Your experience is broken now. So consider that belief system and how it might be limiting your ability to get out of survival mode. Because you're now dependent on this concept of the body and how we intellectualize it. That's an intellectual thought telling you are your body. Just go there. Interesting, right? Process through that. Go the other direction. I'm going to suggest that you really stay. You're going to have to let that one go if you want to recover, because you're held hostage by what you believe a spiritual body is. Then what is a spiritual body? Just think about that.
I don't know, because I don't even know if the body can be spiritual.
You might want to think a little. Yeah, you never thought about that. Oh, okay. So what if I get burns all over my body? Does that mean I must have done something karmically? Maybe. But does that mean that your soul is burned? My soul burned?
No, but the soul, you don't think that the soul does experience life through the body, so you have to kind of take care of it in it.
To some degree, but there's not. But what you're saying is that the body needs me to know how to take care of it. Do we really know how to take care of the body? Because do you realize for us to know what the body needs, we have to create the body and understand it from that plethora of angles of evolution and how it needs to be cared for. So no, I don't believe that. The human body can care for itself. We don't need to intellectualize. It actually needs very little from us. You need to go pee, you go pee. I'm thirsty, go get water. I mean, how much really do you need to know? That is so narcissistic. You actually think you know more than the human body. It needs me to take care of it. Really? Really? Does it need you? Because you're actually doing more harm and causing more damage with your narcissism, thinking you know more than the human body and millennia of evolution. No wonder you're in hell. Just consider that thought in and of itself. Someone saying that it's your job to take care of the body. Hold up. So my life, my conscious awareness is not meant to be free. It's meant to fixate on my body. Is that really what the point of your soul is? Is to make sure the body is doing well? Or did evolution do that for you?
That I know. I know that it's not good for me to tell the body what to do and that I should get out of the way. But
how much does it really need if you let it go? How much? How much does it really need? This was so huge for me too when I came out of this. It was so freaking obvious how brainwashed people were about that thought process alone. Because I would have said, that's right. We need to take care of the body. You need to do all these things because that's what's going to make you happy. And that's what life is about. And that's what everything is about. And I realized on the other end, without having to re-brainwash myself with a new program, it was like I became unprogrammed, right? Nothingness. And I realized that the body needs nothing from me. It breathes on its own. It puts me to sleep if I'm tired. Whatever I eat, it's going to do whatever it does with it. And it actually tells me what to eat if I listen. It actually tells me what to eat.
So do you think that the whole health industry and the medical industry who say that you have to do, for example, all the cancers in Belgium, for example, there is like a lot of tumors now and brain cancers. They say that it could have been prevented with a different diet.
Yeah, that's super myopic. That's like looking at it through a straw. And any scientist, to be honest with you, you're not going to hear that from a scientist. You're going to hear that from someone selling a program. So when you look at like science, they're always they're so freaking humble. They're like, this is in a vacuum. We're looking at one aspect from one angle in a vacuum without movement. Because that's the only way.
Because most scientists here are part of a program already.
Well, in general, they won't say stuff because it's so wrong that's so wrong. Because it's like there's so much more to the human body than the gut. And has anybody looked at, has anybody looked at fight or flight and how that impacts digestion?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Duh. I mean, it's like, that's so elementary. Why aren't they looking at it so easy?
Well, they go around. They say, let's
and then
to measure the cortisol, how it affects the heart.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but the cortisol that is expressed because you're actually eating food that you're fear-mongered while you're eating it.
They do, kind of. But they say the cortisol is because of the sugar, so they lie again.
Hold on a second, but then there's gluconeogenesis that occurs while you're in fight or flight prior to even eating food. So is it really the sugar? Is it the the dominant process of gluconeogenesis coming from the liver glycogen. I mean, you're diabetic before you even eat the food just because you're in fight or flight. That's how it's supposed to work. So should we blame the food or the fight or flight response of gluconeogenesis?
That's really interesting.
I know. And they're not going to talk about that because they're blaming the food. The benefit of blaming food is that we have answers and we're your savior. We're going to be your rescuer. It's called codependency. It's drama triangle shit.
They can make so much money.
Correct.
It's narcissistic, all of us. And we just stay stuck in our head.
Yeah. So the thing about it is when you come out of it, is it's so in a straw. You're looking at it through a straw, which is a symptom of fight or flight. Tunnel vision.
Can I ask you, like, since you are not anymore in that state, just maybe it will motivate me more. Like, do you feel more like you know what to eat when, and you just feel more in peace with all these things and healthy?
I don't believe in the concept of healthy because that to me is like, who knows what that is. So even what is that? Tell me what healthy is.
Like you wake up and you feel fresh and you feel happy to be alive, not a prisoner.
That's psychological. So you're driving, let's talk about what is healthy. I mean, I chopped the top of my fingers off and the fat was coming out. My hands basically healed themselves. I guess that's healthy, I guess. Last time I was sick, I felt better after I had a fever. I don't know. There's that. I slept last night. I did wake up. I do know that I'm sitting here. My ears are working. I don't know. I have nothing to do with any of it. It's just spontaneously occurring. I can't even tell you what health is. So the concept of health, it's like, who really knows what that is? That's like saying you're really spiritual. And how do you feel when you wake up when you feel spiritual? Well, what is spiritual? What do you mean by that? What's your definition of it?
Somebody has to define it.
Oh, and what does that take? Tell me what that takes for someone to know. I know what spirituality is. What does that take? Wow. It's probably some raging sociopathic narcissist knows what spirituality is. Because I don't know. I have no freaking clue. I'm just spontaneously experiencing this. I have no power over it. I often don't even know why I'm saying what I'm saying to you. It just comes to me. I'm not going to claim any of it. When someone says, but we know what healthy is, the first thing I think is the fact that you're using that definition is like, okay. We can use it as a word that can describe something, but the awareness of what healthy is, who the fuck knows what that is? If someone tells you they know what that is, wow. So you must create, not the universe. You are the massive, you know it all from the top of all relative perspective. What does that mean?
Really.
How do I know?
I feel like it really cleared up in my head.
What I'm giving you is perspective, like relative. Remember I said this requires a super relative outside looking in. So what the problem is when you believe this dogma is you're stuck inside of it. There's no way to get out.
No, I just realized something huge, but it's also because I'm in the medical field, kind of. That is that by saying to us, even in a course, this is healthy, this is not healthy, it's so arrogant because it means that somebody who's maybe sick but having some creative process that we don't even know is considered not healthy. So it's already the basis of the body image industry is there.
Yes, it's like, well, it's a
program in a program.
Correct. So if we look at body image, a lot of people will make the initial assumption is it's an image of what you look like. They think it's, oh, I want to be pretty. I want to be attractive. Of course, that's part of what defines or what we can say is the idea behind body image is attractive sexual nature. But there's also this idea of the fear of death, which would take disease and that would be like a bear. So we're going to take disease and make it into a threat, right? This is an industry. So I know that there's theory here in the United States around where the United States, this whole concept of fear around disease occurred. And they see the link between insurance companies and how they drove their business. They needed people to fear disease to buy into it. And so that was when the height and weight charts were created here, and they paid a statistician to look at the association to problems, and they found that the fatter a body is, the more problems they experience. That is so myopic, right? Because you could go, well, the body is prone to gain weight under stress, under fight or flight. Again, gluconeogenesis. So there's a big picture, right? We can see around evolution and how the body gaining weight is absolutely healthy under this environment. So under these environments, we would expect the body to be fat or to gain more weight, especially when they're under...
Because it's constantly in fight or flight.
Correct. And if it's with food, it's going to be magnified because you're eating and having fight or flight while you're eating food. Anyway, so when you look at the Second World War or even the Depression in the United States, okay, obviously I'm using the history I'm aware of. I can't...
No, but I know.
Okay, there's history where you have too, and you can go, well, there was a lot of famine. There was actually a lot of famine and starving, and you can see why then food would become highly, important to that generation. And so take fight or flight, the fear of famine, and you're probably going to have a generation of weight gain. Why are we judging that? Of course, this is how it has probably worked for millennia. Think about it. Think of the distance involved here. Distance, create big distance. Yes, that to me sounds like not only healthy psychology around the fight or flight, around famine and starvation, but then this, the gripping onto food because of that is like Maslow's first hierarchy of needs. Like, no, duh. Why are we even like, oh my God, they have an eating disorder? No, they don't. Look at this from a big distance. So then we have the capitalism, huge push to capitalism and capitalizing in business and the creativity around it. Awesome, right? Well, what if someone's capitalizing on your fight or flight? Disease, fear, you're going to die. You could have a heart attack, diabetes. You should come in and you need to get your height and weight checked. So all of a sudden, body fat became the bear. It became what's going to kill you. So now we have this birth of the diet industry. We'll rescue you. It's the fat you're eating. You need to shake the fat with this shaky machine. So it's awesome because really they're just complying to our inflamed brains. We need a solution, and that's what's going to do it. Massage the fat. Let's just massage the fat. It'll get rid of it. And you know what? How fabulous do you think people felt when people massaged their fat? I just feel so thin afterwards. And I feel so at peace because I know that my calves are smaller because they massage the fat in my calves.
But when you say inflated brains, you mean that's because of our fight or flight?
Yes. Yeah, totally. When I say inflamed, I'm basically saying your brain is saying, stop everything, hyper-focus on your survival. Oxygen goes to the deep center of the brain. It goes away from your cortex. Blood goes away from the gut. It goes to your extremities. You end up having the manifestation of anxiety. And anxiety is seeking a resolve. So let's focus on a solution. Stop eating gluten. All of a sudden you feel like it's better for you. And you're like, I have a solution. Go to church. That's what's going to make you feel better about yourself. Oh, yeah, I feel good when I leave because people like me because I'm going to church. There's so much humanness here, right? So, of course, they're going to blame the food. That is immediately making you feel better. And you're buying it, following it. It's thriving. A system is now going in circles. But now we have all of these consequences. I guarantee your culture is going to have an influx of orthorexic problems. Obsession with purity in food to the point where you end up with diseases because we're really not smart enough to do what we think we're doing. The person who's pushing gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, sugar-free, gluten-free, they have a lot of problems, and they're not going to tell you because they're superior, right?
They're hiding it.
Oh, of course they're hiding it because they're getting off on the idea that I am the leader and no one can know I have problems, basically drinking Kool-Aid. Everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid. And until we all find out another generation has a psychological consequence from it. Oh, now the next generation.
There is a next generation.
Well, of course there's going to be a next generation. Of course there's going to be a next generation. Of course. And they're the ones who are going to be anti-diet. You know? And that's not the goal either. Because it's still self-righteous to be anti. You know? It's like the diet part of this makes sense to me because it is the rescuer. It's like a shield. It's like your defense mechanism against what you're afraid of, which is death by body fat. You know? The other part of this...
all diets necessarily, bad. And I mean, like, I don't know if all diets are bad. Like, I just know that for me, it makes me feel like horrible.
Depends on your state of mind. It all comes down to, because actually we could say if someone is in fight or flight, their body's need for food is dramatically reduced, so they should not be eating very much. That would make sense to me.
I've never thought about that.
Well, yeah, if you look at it from a... The problem is that doesn't resolve the actual source of the actual trigger. It's just complying. You're trying to create balance by putting the body into a starved state, which makes sense if someone's in fight or flight. Their body doesn't need food. They're naturally kind of have more diabetes. It just is funny that they're blaming it on sugar. Not looking at fight or flight as the source of this. And it's not to say fight or flight is the blame. It's actually what's to be expected if this person...
And maybe the fight or flight even prefers sugar because it's so fast and it just wants to keep on moving.
No,
we
that's...
We know that. We never studied it.
Not... Well, yeah, but that, to me, it's like, no, actually, the prefer in sugar is dealing with the narcissistic downside of shame, the loss, feeling victimized. That would want sugar because now you're looking for dopamine. So that to me is like, well, yeah, for people who are in their narcissism, if they feel sorry for themselves, they're going to seek that out. Someone who's in real fight or flight doesn't go, I need sugar. That's not what happens. It happens for someone who's like, poor me, my life is terrible. I deserve it. That's a different situation, right? Oh my God, it's so ridiculous. But here's the thing. If you need someone to unravel that for you, you're never going to recover. And I won't do it. Because that's like trying to get someone who's a religious zealot to leave their religion.
No, but I already now that I can't define health, so you already, like, I'm going to, it's fixed in my head. Like,
well, you have to just rely on the millennia of evolution that's occurred. Wow.
I'm like that. If I can't have an answer to something, then it doesn't make sense, then it's fine. Like, I don't know what is health. I can't define it.
No, you can just rely on millennia of evolution. You can just rely on that.
So,
the other thing is...
to eat meat because I don't have something against it to say no,
So you can just let it be. You can let it be. If you feel like it, is it really worthy of shame? If you don't feel like it, is that worthy of pride? Why would you want your life to be focused on that? Does it really matter? Do you want it to matter? So that right there is the actual thing you should be realizing. I don't want it to matter. So what's the answer here?
I don't want to even consider. I don't want anyone to talk about food to me ever.
Okay, so how do you get to the point where it just runs off like water? What's going to happen? What do you have to surrender? Your health.
My own fake identity.
You're going to have to surrender your fear of cancer. You got to surrender everything. So remember when I said to you, what happens when you give this up is all of a sudden these underlying beliefs start, and that feeling of I'm going to die is going to start manifesting. I'm going to have cancer. Well, let's question, are you really afraid to die? Because in the end, that's what this is about. I mean, that's what the whole mechanism is. It's a survival mechanism. On the other side of survival is what? Non-existence. Well, non-existence. So survival, the mechanism is to keep you alive. On the other side is death. So if you're stuck in a survival mode, what is it you're refusing to accept?
So you need to let go of the fear of death to be out of survival.
Correct.
That's a big one.
It's so beautiful. It was the most important. Now do you see why I say that decision to commit suicide was that was the most important decision in my current awareness today. It opened up because I became less afraid to die than the fear I had maintaining this insanity. It was a big boom, boom, like the big shift. And it sounds like you've had some of that, like with your ex-boyfriend who you were like, I'd rather this, like I stayed with him in fear of this. Well, I'd rather fear what I have with this person than that. So it flips.
I would rather fear everything.
Yeah, like everything that you stayed with him because you were afraid of, you'd actually rather have that than this. So you open yourself up to fear, right? Like I am accepting the fact that I might be homeless. I will be alone. No one's going to love me. I'm a chewed up piece of gum. I'm old. No one's going to like an old person. You go into being alone. So that's going into the actual trigger of that survival. So it opens you up to what actually originally triggered this response, which is if you're not married, you're going to be a piece of shit. You have to, there's belief systems in place that are the precursor. Okay, remember when we talked about the amygdala? There are belief systems in place that actually are triggering that response. That is the precursor to the response. How you perceive yourself and your environment. That's not something that's just hardwired. Those are taught to you. Those are programs that are triggering this reaction. Right? So for example, what triggered it in me was the belief that premarital sex, so sex before marriage, so abstaining from sex and waiting till marriage was what the Lord wanted. It is a sign of purity, dedication, and love of God, of Jesus. Okay. And so it was praised and it was magnified into this fantasy of amazingness. And your life is like you have reached the pearly gates of heaven if you wait until you're married. Okay, that was a belief. How harmful could that be?
To believe that?
Yeah. Like when you hear that, you're like, well, yeah. I mean, you're limiting disease exposure. You're saving something sacred for someone you love, right? Can you see how that might really impact someone because of the humanness they live in? I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yeah, I do. It does.
It's like, okay, so when I ended up having sex before marriage, how do you think that impacted my psyche? What do you think happened?
Felt shame?
It triggered a survival problem. Yeah. That belief. I never questioned that.
Not the sex itself. Hopefully nice, but probably not.
Well, it wasn't because I was the whole time thinking, I'm doing something wrong. I'm doing something wrong. It's no different than someone who believes in food righteousness, who's like eating candy going, I'm doing something wrong. I'm doing something wrong. And then the shame afterwards. I'm a piece of shit. I'm a horrible person. I am now removed from the love of God. I am a lesser human being. I will never, ever reach that pearly gate. I'm a horrible...
As if we need to deserve the love of God. It's horrible to think.
Well, not to someone who believes it. To them, it is access to that. To them, it's a pathway to that. Clearly you don't think you need a pathway. It is there, right? But some people don't know that. They think I have to make it happen. No different than you thinking that health has to happen. Don't we have to make the body?
Need to gain purity from it's the same.
Yeah, it is the same. It's like it's the same. It's like, here's your weaponry and here's your tools and you need these tools to be safe. Because inherently you suck. Inherently you're inadequate. Inherently the body needs you to take care of it. It really doesn't work well on its own because, for millennia, it needed humans to mentally process what it should do to be healthy.
I just realized how narcissistic I was. Like one day my dad came over and he gained some weight, and he used to be very sporty. And I was in my time where I was working out a lot, obsessed with it, and I was gonna make a smoothie for him and everything. And he said to me, "Oh, it's funny how I see that you're so busy with this. I hope you're happy." And I said to him, "Dad, you gained a lot of weight. How come? Like, you should be healthy." And he was laughing. He said, Bianca, you have to know one thing. Do you really think that by eating this way you will die in a different timing? You think you decide over that?
And you were probably...
He said, no, just answer me this. You think you have any control over your death? Like, if you have to die tomorrow, you're going to die. So I prefer to have it with my belly because I love to eat. And I just didn't know what to say. I was like, of course you have a control over your death. And he said, that's the
arrogant
I've heard in my life. And I truly believe it.
Well, so the thing is that belief comes from the vulnerability and fear you have of dying. So you want to control it. Yeah. But do you see how that you wouldn't know that intellectually? You're just being run by it. Because who's not afraid to die? It's like a dogma. It's a dogma belief. Isn't everybody afraid of diabetes? Right? I would rather have diabetes than an eating disorder. Just give me some insulin. That's so easy. I can still love. I can still exist. I can still have an amazing life.
That resonates, but I heard you in another video where you were saying that you would be able to, to gain like 500 pounds.
Yeah, I would.
And I was trying yesterday, I think. I was like, I'm going to try to get into that space. It's impossible.
It is not impossible. It's you rely to... Well, you're relying too heavily. You're relying too heavily on your identity with the body. You actually believe...
No, it's just that you cannot move then anymore.
That doesn't matter. To me, that's like, but movement isn't where life exists. It's just you could... So this is what the shifting has to happen, is you have to go deeper. You got to go way deeper than you think you've already gone. And you probably think you're so deep. You know, you got to go way deeper. Because...
Like, how do I do that?
First of all, you'd have to have humility. You're lacking that. Don't take that personal when I say that, because I'm not putting you down, but you are lacking humility. You clearly believed you knew what health was, so clearly there's a lack of humility in there. And we could call that a neuropeptide. There's a neuropeptide we can call humility that you're lacking in. Okay. So you'd have to surrender the narcissism to say, I really don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. If I were to tell the truth, I am frightened. I am a pathetically weak, unaware child. And you'd have to go there first. So you have to get to your reality of truth, and then you go there and ask that soul to experience obesity, and then tell me what it's like. Because it's way, way less work than what you're doing. You know, the physicality of the body is not life. Consciousness is life. At least that's just, you could say, what do we really need from the body to actually have an expression or to experience life? Because think of the infinite ways to experience life. Think of the limitation that you're aware of if you think it comes from moving your limbs. Right? Is there a different way to actually experience life? Because you're just experiencing. Remember, it's spontaneous. You have nothing to do with it. It's occurring. So go into what it is that you're experiencing. Are you experiencing, go into what this is. There is you could say, well, okay, I'm aware. I'm conscious. I am aware of my surroundings. I have eyesight that gives me sight of what I'm seeing. The ears are giving me a reception that way, a vibration concept of what's happening. I have taste, smell. I have temperature around my skin. There's so much we probably don't even have words for that we're experiencing in terms of conscious awareness of our environment, right? And it's spontaneously occurring. What are you doing? What are you actually doing in this moment?
Breathing.
You're doing nothing. You're not even breathing. It's doing it for you. You're just experiencing. You're a witness, essentially. So if you, let's just go into a body, what would that be like to witness in a body that's morbidly obese?
I think it would be quiet there, like kind of compared to mine.
Your previous assumption was shame. Where did that come from? Because that's not the truth. That is a belief pattern that is filtering.
My body to the bigger body, but now I went directly to the bigger body.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Pass by mine.
Well, you'll notice that there really is no difference. It's the same witness, the same exact witness. Whether you're in a morbidly obese body, an anorexic thin body with your hips poking out, whether you're in a wheelchair as a paraplegic, if you're blind, Dr. Stephen Hawking, who just recently died, who literally had no physical function except for consciousness. I think he had sight, hearing. I mean, what did he need? You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, yes.
What did he need really to be the, to make such an impact in his life?
Just to allow the message to get through.
Yeah, he just all he needed was the ability to witness and then be curious about it. That's all he needed. He didn't have couldn't digest food, couldn't eat food, couldn't do anything, couldn't talk. The computers did all that for him. I mean, so think of the amount of life you're ignoring, right? When you think you have to be mobile. Just think of all of the ignorance in that. Just that one thought. My life is the body's ability to move. Is it really? Is that it?
I think I just enjoy it,
Well, there's nothing wrong with enjoying that. But you're going beyond enjoy. It's called inflation and pride. That's why to you it's so catastrophic if it goes away, because you have no concept of an alternative. You've identified by it. So who are you? Let's go into that question. If you had a body that is damaged, who are you? Are you the body? Are you the damage?
No.
Well, based on your belief system, you sure as hell are. And your life is limited, and poor you don't get to be like everybody else who's moving. Just think of the limitation in the thought that you have to have an easy body. Just think of that. When someone needs a perfect body or an easy body, you know what that tells me? They are very limited. Yeah, they have to have an easy body because they psychologically and spiritually are in survival, really. Because you're not allowing the body to be so that you can witness. You're being a body and managing the body because that's what you think life is about. The body.
Would you say that you're witnessing less then?
Yeah. Hell yeah. You're not really witnessing anything other than yourself. It's self-centered. You're in survival mode. It's all about self-preservation, and you're attaching your preservation to a body. Which in the end is going to die. So it becomes your biggest threat because you're afraid of that. So your biggest threat is your body, and you're treating it that way. It needs to be controlled. We need to make sure, not questioning that you're basically cannibalizing your own life by taking the body that is providing you unconditional witnessing here on so many levels, and you're making that the threat of your life. So the life it's giving you is actually needs to be controlled because it's threatening you.
Wow. Never thought about that.
Yeah. I mean, this is the, I think this was the bottom. Like, to me, this was the bottom of, I can imagine when someone truly separates from their body at the time of death, or at the time that the body is done and the soul is released, or the essence of the experiencer is released, or the existence of that body is released from whatever, okay? That you have to detach from your identity as the body. Like, is this body me? Because otherwise you're going to be very, very, very traumatized by the act of death. Because the illusion is that when this body dies, I die. So again, this was something that I experienced as I prepared to die, because I was preparing to be non-existent, right? And so the awareness of, well, is the essence I feel, the beauty of the child within me, this happiness, this lovingness that I know has been there this whole time, does that really die, and does that really deserve to die? You know? And I had to separate it from the body. Like, I am not this body. I'm not the thinness. I'm not the fitness. None of this is actually real. The experience is the witness. The only thing that felt real to me was the actual witness that I was experiencing. And the sense that I felt within, that felt loving, that was the only true thing about it. And I can't even claim that as mine, because it's just spontaneously there as a sense of lovingness. So when I say, who am I don't know. Do I need to know? Other than I am here witnessing this experience, and I'm having a good time.
You just are.
Yeah, I don't attach to any of it. The benefit is that it's like I just am present in the raw feelings I had when my dog died. Just present with what that was and what it felt like as I witnessed it and as it arose, you know. Because I am in a physical human bodysuit, right? So it comes with evolution attached to it based on the species I am, you know, I'm attached to. So I have human experience. I experience things sequentially. No different than you. So I'm witnessing it from this vantage point, right? But how many vantage points exist from this space of being? Well, I'm open to all of it. So I'm not held hostage or looking through a straw of religion anymore. A straw of what health is. I do not want to manage this body ever again. When it dies, I will willfully surrender this body. It has been an amazing witness for me. It has provided an incredible experience of consciousness. I don't need it to have feet for me to appreciate it. I don't need it to be thin. I don't need it to be tan. I don't need it to be young. I don't need it to have long eyelashes. I don't need any of it, because none of that is actually what I want to witness. It's just superficial shit that really has no impact unless I want it to, and then that's what I focus on. Because, you know, our brains and how we're wired as humans is in the presence of now sequentially. So what do I want to focus on in the presence of now in a sequence? Do I really want to focus on food? Do I really want to focus on that shit?
But I mean, okay, I get that, but you could also say that if you say everything is consciousness, then you take it to a very, very, like, reductionist point, because it's like, you say, like, I'm not the body, which I understand, but then isn't it part of this human experience as well to kind of, like, for example, a beautiful model, like, I don't even know if I could call it beautiful, but, like, isn't she born and with this body for a reason, part of this experience to have the pain that comes with it? And so isn't letting go of all of it maybe a bit like an extreme point that maybe was necessary for you? But I don't know if saying that everybody, like, I don't know, I actually don't know if maybe the suffering is kind of part of it. That's what I find so hard.
I think it is a part of it. I truly believe at some point the suffering is there until you actually go down to that point. You can, if you believe in past lives, future lives. I know for me that the ability to get to this, let's just say out of survival mode, it required that I go to the point of accepting death to get out of that trigger, because it is wired to trigger with fear of death. So yeah, I actually do believe this. It just doesn't, some people don't have to suffer to that degree. I don't think you should have to suffer to that degree. I think it really comes down to just being open to the vulnerability of death. And then all of a sudden what happens is your need to clutch onto this controllingness loosens, right? I don't know if I understood what you said. Let me know if I'm not, but I'm not saying throw the...
It's just that I wonder, like, the whole thing on Earth is like people have jobs and...
Yeah, well, we got to function. We got to function, and this is the beauty of this, is that it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I still assimilate into my culture. I still wear makeup and high heels, which is super misogynistic bullshit. I still assimilate. I do. I just don't take it serious. It's all dress up. It's like, I don't value myself, and I'm not going to take it so serious. I'm not clutching onto it with my life. It's,
so why do you do something that hurts your feet?
Well, because fitting in. I'm going to a dance with a gown. Should I wear my dance goes with my gown?
It doesn't feel right.
Well, then I wouldn't force myself to wear shoes that were so horrible. I would, it's like wearing clothing real loose. Why does it have to be so tight? And does it need to be so tight on the anti side of the spectrum? Do I have to be anti high heels? Well, that's not really making a big difference, is it? I mean, if I'm anti-high heels, I'm the same as the pro-high heels. Like, why do I need to think about high heels so much? Can't I just assimilate? If I were to go into a different culture, I would assimilate. If I were to go into your culture, you have different cultural, social, animal, human behaviors.
Supremacy one.
Well, that part I would laugh at, but whatever. I wouldn't take it serious. If I was morbidly obese, I wouldn't give a shit. People can think I'm a terrible person. Those are their beliefs, and that's their dogma, and that's their shame and guilt that they're afraid of. I don't have to carry it, right? It's like being black in a white supremacist community. Do I have to really be ashamed and hide, or can I just be myself and let other people have their own problems? And if my life is threatened, I'll live on the side of the hill somewhere, there's an assimilation. Yeah. So it's a, the forgivingness of your human nature too. So the forgiveness of people who are stuck in survival mode. I've been there. They're running off of this is the way people exist in that space. Should I judge them for it? No, because you know what? Their lack of awareness and the limits and the suffering, eventually they'll figure it out on their own. Like I did.
Like I will.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you figure it out. You might need to suffer a lot more. You might say your belief around, I don't think people have to do that. Well, you figure that out, then let me know how it goes. Like, how can I hold on to my narcissistic supremacy and recover? I don't know. You let me know when that happens for you. You know what I mean?
I don't want to be one anymore.
So you have to surrender what you get out of it. You have to give up the benefits, and it's going to feel...
I'm going to write a list of all the imaginary benefits I get from it.
Well, it's not going to feel imaginary because it feels real. I mean, it feels like to the survival part of you, it's going to feel like this is keeping me alive because I can't handle it. And that's another part of this. It's so there's more than just one angle to look at. So when we look at what triggers survival, it's not just the environment you're in. It's how you perceive it. And what affects your perception is your sense of capacity. Can I handle it? If you can't handle it, then you're going to need to grip onto a weapon, right? Do you see how it's not just the environment? It's not just, am I fat? It's, can I handle the limitations? Can I handle other people's ignorance? Can I handle... That to me is one of the most important perspectives I have not read enough about. I have not seen it enough. I have not, even Dr. Hawkins, the guy that I study, not Hawkins, David Hawkins, his work, I haven't seen enough of that being questioned. What triggers this? Well, I truly want to open up a discussion about your perception of capacity. Is a huge part of the trigger because there's so many people who don't feel capable and they do. And what happens when someone feels capable? Do they have the same response to that same exact environmental challenge? How does the brain respond to someone feels capacity or, I do know the science around, there's a lot of research around competence, when they study.
And resilience as well, it's called. Like some people feel completely different with threat than other people.
Yeah, what is it that brings someone to have competence? Usually it's coordinated with lenience around the outcome. So what they're describing is someone who's not in survival mode. Those are like to be expected when someone's not in survival mode. But how do you get there? Well, they feel competence. They have competence in themselves. And if it doesn't work out, they're lenient around the end result. But that's what you get when you're not in survival mode. So, what is it? What is it that gets someone there, right? I know for me, it required that I accept abandonment, rejection, disapproval, because that is the ultimate trigger of that third hierarchy of need as pack animals. The belief that I need someone to feel loved is a problem. So I've gone into really simplifying it to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's so freaking simple. And it's almost like, wow, it's so easy. Yeah. So the clients I work with that come out, they're like, holy shit, that was it? That's a joke. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's not hard. It's the easiest thing I've ever done. It's like, why isn't this normal? Why don't they teach it in grade school? Because I think the system is geared to survival mode. I mean, it's like people are in it. They can't see anything outside of it. They don't even know that something else exists. The only way they'd be open to this, especially because of the narcissism that is so pervasive, is if they surrender the narcissism. And that's really not going to happen when someone inflates themselves with pride around this belief system and that belief system. It's like they're going to have to suffer to the point where they're willing to let it go, just like you did with your codependent relationship. Oh my God, that was a lot.
Yeah. So did you record it?
Yeah, I did. So you get to listen to this over and over again.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm gonna do some work on my destruction. I will call it like that.
Yeah, just go into death. That's the thing too, Bianca, I want you to understand is we're not wired to do what I'm telling you to do. Mm-mm. We're wired to avoid, repress,
pain.
Right? Yeah. If the bear is in the room, you're not wired to go, here, kill me. Do what you wish. That's not our wiring. So it's like the direction, the way I was open to this experience was going the opposite direction of my actual wiring. So when you hear someone in those YouTube videos and they're like, what? That was so easy. I'm like, I know, you do nothing. You literally just go into that space, allow things to happen, which means you do nothing. And it's like your brain changes. It's like the whole, it's almost like it just, again, the neuroplasticity of the brain, rewiring the brain. It's like the whole thing functions differently. What used to trigger fight or flight is like, does nothing. It literally does nothing. So it's almost like that response, that survival response is like really resilient. It becomes hard to trigger once you've gone through the actual pathway of death. That makes sense. Because you have a discernment that you have control over it. I absolutely, based on how I perceive things, I'm the one who is controlling that I mean, I don't create the reaction. That part is evolution working perfectly, but I have a choice in any given situation to adjust the dial of how I respond. And if I want to respond this way versus this way versus this way, it changes the outcome of my body's response to it, right? So in any given situation, like when I had to put my dog down, my physical reaction was to, don't do it, avoid it, she can stay here longer. But intuitively in my soul and my heart had to face what I didn't want to face, right? That's a choice to go into pain. That's the beauty of this process, is it becomes choice. You're not run by it. You're not run by that animal response. So your hair may stand up, the physical reaction that your body experiences if you were truly standing in front of a bear, it's there. But when when you transcend the impulsiveness of it, you now have a choice to what you want to do. It's like it opens space-time, right? Now that sounded a little crazy.
No.
Anyways, this is like, yeah, it's like unwashing. There's no program here. It's basically open yourself up to reality. What is the reality? Just open yourself up to it. So you open it up relative to the limits of a human experience. But when you open yourself up to that reality, you're no longer in control. You're no longer the master. Does that make sense? You have choice, but you're constantly witnessing. So it is coming to you and you are reactive, so you choose to either go through the side. It's now you're a free agent, if that makes sense. Now we have choice.
It's a bit like a channel.
I guess so. It's just a different way of being.
It comes through. Yeah.
Well, it's an existent, the way that Dr. Hawkins describes it, I love his way of describing it because I've always felt this way too, is that it's not me, it's that level of consciousness. Every person, animal, whatever that's in that space is exactly the same, getting the same information. It's like being at a level of vibration or like a
connection,
an energy level. It's not me that's streaming. It is just, it's there at all times. It's just being open to potential and awareness. So it just is like, well, I'm not that energy. I'm not streaming that. It's existent everywhere. It's just I am now open to experiencing it. I'm not closed in my own narcissism, or closed in my own self-preservation to survive, because I'm not afraid to die. So I'm open to witnessing it or experiencing something I don't even know exists. I'm not the creator of it. You become aware. And it's not your knowledge, it's just knowledge. And then you become aware the knowledge is so relative, because it's still limited by my own animal perceptions of it. So I know inherently, just by even what I'm saying, is so inadequate to what it actually is. So, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because we are in a
very limited world. Correct. We're lonely seeing things from a sequential perception, and that's all I have. So it's kind of cute. It's so cute, these humans.
Yeah, super cute.
Anyways, all right. Well, I hope this was helpful.
It was super helpful. Thank you so much. I'll work on things and